The version of you that has had enough is the version of you that will change everything. And when I say this, it's speaking to the fact that today you are a different person than you were yesterday, than you were 2 days ago, than you were 3 days ago, than you will be tomorrow. There are different versions of yourself every waking moment. And the version of you now is essentially trying to make it better for the version of you tomorrow. You're putting things in place like making your bed. So when you show back up to it, oh, thanks, past version of myself. There's this meme that's going around that a friend just sent me, and it said, getting out of bed, no, going to bed and looking at who closed up and thinking, man, who the heck closed up here? Waking up and opening and thinking, nah, I'll leave this for the closers. And it goes in this perpetual loop of you don't take care of your bed, so it's never taken care of, and you're constantly in this loop of I don't care, disappointed, I don't care, I'm disappointed. And so when you become fed up with that, when you become tired of that, when you are done with that, that is when you will make the bed. And the future version of yourself will say, thank you. And then they know a world where that bed is made, so they will make it again for the next future version of yourself. And so the loop will go, and you will continue to serve future versions of yourself. Because the version of you right now knows the version before, and what they left undone, what they left unkempt, what they left for you to clean up. And once you take care of that, you'll then start to get some clarity, not only on how to make things run smoother for you, but how to develop a relationship with yourself, how to make this more functional for you, how to build, how to grow, how to expand. And so once you start doing that, you get a lot of clarity on who you are. And that is some of the greatest clarity that you can ever have. I said this in a past video. I believe it was a community organizer that says, do you know who you're dealing with? And the person said, yes, I know the opposition. I know who I'm dealing with. And they said, no, do you know who you are dealing with? And they said, what do you mean? Do you know yourself? Do you know how to deal with yourself? And until we can really engage with how to deal with ourselves, it's going to be very hard to deal with the outside world, to deal with the 3D. And sometimes we invest in the 3D, many times people invest in the 3D before they even invest with themselves. So they're sitting there dealing with all this external stuff before they can even deal with the cause. So they're running around in the fact, and they're dealing with that. So today we're going to give you the 3 things, and I'm almost hesitant to go into this because there's so much to be said about the version of you that has had enough is the version of you that will change everything. The 3 things that we're going to give you is how to get clarity on the versions of you so that you can take care of yourself. And this is a form of self-care as well. 3 ways to gain clarity by looking at yourself and who you are, past versions of yourself. And again, as we usually say, with shame and judgment and all this other stuff, we're gonna consistently make it a practice to watch our language on that and mind that while we move forward in this conversation between you and I. Because if we cannot keep tabs on that and I just take it for granted that you're just gonna not use any judgment on yourself, that's a little bit presumptuous on my part. And it's even presumptuous for me to think that I wouldn't do that for myself. So it's extremely important that we get down to the understanding that while we take these 3 steps, you don't have too much judgment or meritocracy involved in it. There might be some, okay, it is what it is. But I remember hearing somebody say, they were talking about a mental illness, mental health. And they said at the age of 39 or 40, I believe, they said, I started to really delve into the work when I just got tired of my own S being the expletive, but I don't want to say it on my channel yet because I just don't feel it's the place to do that just yet. But 39 or 40, they said they had just gotten tired of their own stuff. And that is a thing that, again, I say this all the time. You'll see people go to the grave with that, with their own patterns, with living in their own, basically not seeing the forest for the trees. They'll go to the grave with that. And if that's their comfort, that's their, it is what it is. There's no judgment there, but there is a way out of it. And when you grow frustrated enough, the continuation, this is a quote from Jeff Moore, frustration fuels your revolution. I think that it can. I also think that frustration can fuel a lot of other things that are deterring from the revolution. And it's super important to understand that just being frustrated on it by itself is not proactivity. So it can be the start. It can be the start. Just because you're frustrated doesn't mean, just because you're fed up, doesn't mean that you're going to change the future versions of yourself. You got to take action. You have to take action. And if you don't, it gets you set in this place where it's just, you have to take on, I believe it's physical, spiritual, and mental. You have to take on all three at the same time. And when people just get caught up in, well, I'm just going to sit here and wait for it, spiritual and mental, and believe it's going to happen. No physical. The results ain't going to come. It just is. It is what it is. And I want to convey this as clearly as possible, is that the first step to getting clarity by introspection, looking inward, is to look at the past versions of yourself. Who were they? Who were they being? What were they doing? More importantly, who were they being? And you can ask yourself what they would do in these situations. What would they do with these certain friendships? Would they even have these friendships that you have right now? Would they move the way that you move right now? What would they do? And really get to know who those past versions were. Not that you need to become them, befriend them, or forgive them, or whatever. Just know them. There is something extremely powerful in understanding yourself before right now. And once you can start to pick that up, you can start to develop, as we said in the last video, you can develop a linear point A to point B. A legacy of understanding who you are and how you've been and where you've come to where you are now. Not saying that you've ascended or, devolved or, whatever it may be, but you were different, right? You were different then than you are now. Why? Who were those past versions of yourself? The frustration that you have, the fed upness, I'm mad as heck and I'm not going to take it anymore. That point that you're at, this point of no return that we find ourselves in is very important, because there's a reason why you're here, and there's a pattern practice that leads up to this. You have been the common denominator in many situations that have led you to this point. And when you take accountability and inventory of where you're at, well, then you can really start to chip away at what you want. And when you have non-resistance, you just look at these past versions of yourself and you're able to start assessing, oh, that was that. Oh, because of that. Oh, because of that. You're starting to draw the line to you right now. And it's a beautiful means of looking at or assessing who you are and taking inventory of who you are, because you get to look at all the past versions of yourself. And while you look at the past versions of yourself, the thing to do is give grace to them. I'm not saying forgive entirely, but just say, understand. Giving them understanding is probably the biggest thing you can do, just looking at them for who they are. The next step would be then to look at yourself. Who is the version that you are right now? Is the version that you're being right now the being that is going to do the thing, that's going to have the things, or that's just going to do the things? Are you proud of who you're being right now? Are you happy with who you're being right now? Are you excited with who you're being right now? Who you're being right now, is this serving you? Is it serving you and then serving others? Is the person that you're being right now giving to yourself what you give to others? Is that it? Because once we start to assess who we are right now, we can then say, okay, how far off, or what do I need to move around here to be the person that I want to be? And being is something that it can happen like that. You can change your state of being simply through meditation, prayer, consistent practice, but you have to keep it up. And once you say you're going to do it, you do it. You make it happen, but you have to assess who you're being right now and who you were being before. And once you can start doing that, then you can find a way where you want to be with the self that you want to be at the moment. So again, it's going to be really tough if there's no awareness of who you were being before and who you're being right now. And once you can do that, then you can start to put stock into your desired outcome, the person that you want to be. And once you do that, now we have a frame, we have an outline, we have a blueprint. We can see where things are and where you want to move to get to the space that you want to be. And the third thing is, once we're looking back at these past versions of yourself and continued past versions of yourself, is to be a friend to those past versions. That might be one of the toughest things to do. We talked about this in one of the first videos of Big Feelings, and that was, what would you say to your kindergarten self, to yourself in kindergarten? What would you tell to that kid? Were there any words of encouragement, any insight, any advice, any wisdom, any love, or just words of compassion that you would give that person? Even the past versions of yourself that are definitely responsible for the perceivable rut that you've gotten yourself into, how can you still be compassionate with them? How can you still show love to these versions of yourself? Is that possible? I think it is. Maybe you don't believe so, but the point is that you look at past versions of yourself and you're able to see how this got to where it is. And now you're gaining clarity on the entire story of your life, or the story that you've been living by in your life, and you're able to break the pattern. I'm a firm believer you can't really break the pattern until you see it. You have to be aware of what's happening to transmutate it. You can't change your vibration if you're not aware of what's going on. That just seems to be a very, very simple law, rule, and principle. Like it just is what it is. And what I had written down that was paired up with Jeff Moore was, when the pain of staying stuck feels higher than the pain of changing, you will then choose to change. The trick is, you do not have to wait for this to happen. Many times we will wait for mortality, somebody will die, and then we'll feel like, oh, I gotta change, I gotta do this. We'll get a scan back and they say, so-and-so, you got X amount of months to live. Or you shouldn't be taking your life for granted. You this is that and the third. And I can't emphasize enough that it doesn't need to come to that for you to make a life change. It really doesn't. And it shouldn't, but then that's kind of putting the onus on the person. But I'll just say that it doesn't. It's that simple. It doesn't have to come to that. You can make a life change. You can alter the version of yourself right now that's going to change everything. And it doesn't take being fed up. It doesn't take being at the precipice. It doesn't take standing at the edge. It doesn't have to. I was on tour. I feel like I've told all these stories, but telling them again in context with extra nuances, never a bad thing. And I was suffering undoubtedly from a lot of anxiety. I thought that every flight that I took, it was going to go down, and that was it. And it was the byproduct of me being entirely inauthentic with myself, with my family, with my friends, with my loved ones, with my work, with my craft. I don't believe I'd done a music show in like 2 or 3 years. I had not. I'd cut out certain friends just passively. And there just was a lot going on throughout those years. But I thought the plane was going to go down. And I'm on tour doing this these galas for this big banking company. And we're in the green room. I believe we're in Denver. And one of the sound people, one of the crew members comes back, and he looked at his plate, and it had meat on it. And he said, I guess they forgot the memo. Takes the filet mignon off of the plate and places it on a napkin. And I'm like, hey, could I have that? And he's like, yeah, sure, take it. And by the way, I love these videos where the sun is going down, because we know where we got to end this thing. It's got to be done at a certain point. There's not enough light to keep it going. And I take the filet mignon, and I'm like, hey man, what's going on? You don't like meat? And he's like, oh no, I don't eat meat, vegetarian. And I said, oh, well, how did you come about that? Because this guy did not look like, he just didn't seem like he was vegetarian for the animals. He told me, he said, I went to the doctor years ago, and the doctor said, you have a daughter, right? And he said, yeah. And the doctor said, well, would you like to walk her down the aisle for graduation? I mean, would you like to see her graduate high school? And he's like, of course. And he's like, well, how about college? He's like, yes, I would love to see her graduate college. And he said, would you want to walk her down the aisle when she gets married? And he said, oh, of course, I've always dreamed of that. And the doctor said, you're going to get one of those because you're going to die before she ever graduates college. And he said, I'm not saying that with certainty, but it's not, your heart is going to buckle at some point. And he was like, what? He said, the way that you have dieted and the things that you're putting in your body, your life expectancy it's that. You got to change. Or this is the information I'm giving you. Do with it what you will. And so the guy says, okay, what can I do? And so he figures out a lot of different things. And one of them was not eating meat, having a vegetarian diet. Has a vegetarian diet. He tells me how amazing it is. He tells me how everything in his life has changed, how he monitors his health closer, how he's more aware, how he can measure out where he's at. He has clarity of who he is. He has clarity about his situation. And most of all, he has clarity about himself and his own trajectory, and he can alter it however he sees fit. And so in the knowing, he has this beautiful gift where he's just able to access certain freedoms to be, because he knows who he is and he knows where he's at. And he also knows what he wants. He said as much to the doctor. And he reached a point where he was given news where you either have to change or something else will happen. And he chose a version of himself that changes everything, which was, it could be seen as simple as, I'm going to stop eating meat. But he made a life choice because he wanted those certain things. And that choice then becomes more intentional. You are not taking it for granted. Come back to this about my story, the story of my grandmother and I. When I made the choice, I didn't want to take this for granted anymore. I wanted to be more intentional with her. I knew that she was going to pass away. I started showing up differently. And it shouldn't have, for me, I can say for myself, it shouldn't have taken the circumstances to getting to that point. Because I could have taken that action any other time. Why did it take, grandma may, pass away at some point, for me to start showing up like that? And there's an explanation for that, but I'm saying that the goal is that you do not have to wait for that. You can start being as healthy as you want right now. You can start doing the thing right now. You can learn the language before going on the trip right now. You can reach out to that person and say, I love you, unprompted. I love doing that, by the way. I love reaching out to friends and saying, hey, how you doing? I'm doing well. What do you want to? I don't want anything. Just want to check in and say, hey, that's all. Literally, I love doing that. It is so much fun because it's just this unconditionality, if that's even a word, just showing compassion. And I don't want it to have to get this to some place before reaching out to somebody. And I think with the story about the guy that goes vegetarian, there are past versions of himself that, if continued, they would have never saw his daughter, walk down the aisle for graduation, or been able to walk her down the aisle when and if she gets married. And the version of him now is being different. It's a brand new world. And you can change the version of yourself and open up this new world and gain clarity of who you are by looking at the past versions of yourself, taking an assessment of the current version of yourself, and then taking all those versions, and essentially saying, I get it. I understand. All right, rock and roll. Let's get it on with the new. And it doesn't need to take exigent circumstances or an event of mortality for you to get there. But what I wish for you is the new version, or the current version that's really rocking and rolling that you love right now. I really wish that for you. That's going to change everything going forward. So yeah, that's all I got. Clarity, it's coming, or it's already here. I mean, my goodness, you're going to have it, and there's going to be more of it. It's just going to keep happening and happening. But as for the clarity of this the sunlight right now, we are losing that. And, there is clarity in the dark. We'll talk about shadow work some other time. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next video.